Reading people's minds, well, it's the stuff of science fiction, right? Well, don't be so sure, because researchers at Sydney's University of Technology are currently working on a way to do it, using MRI scans to measure brain activity in response to specific words and using AI to map patterns in the brain. They believe reading minds is pretty close to being a thing. And as always, all of these things are predicted by The Simpsons.
I know you can read my thoughts, Bart. Just a little reminder. If I find out you cut class, your ass is mine. Yes, you heard me. I think words I would never say.
I know you can read my thoughts, boy. Meow, 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 meow.
Now, if the researchers at Sydney's University of Technology are successful, there's some great applications for this. Doctors hope that it will help, for instance, stroke victims to be able to communicate. Business people are hoping that we'll be enabled to operate devices such as laptops by simply thinking. But Freya and Caleb, there are always downsides. Can you imagine advertisers would be salivating at the thought of knowing the very words to use that will trigger your brain? They could advertise directly to you and have you buying things without you even realising why you're buying it. And I imagine an overly enthusiastic police minister wanting to use this technology to have alleged criminals self-incriminate by their own thoughts. Caleb, surely our brain should be the final frontier of privacy. I'm not convinced this is a good idea.
This could be exceedingly dangerous. I'm totally on board with the medical applications. For this, people who are non-verbal, I mean, you know, in the same way that we develop cochlear implants for people who are deaf, extraordinary technology that allows them to hear. If it can assist people in a medical way, I think that is totally justified, and that research should be done. And of course, Elon Musk has been getting on board with that with his Neuralink chip that he wants to do. But once we've developed that technology for people to use for medical purposes, you can bet your bottom dollar, unless there is regulation in place that prevents it from being used for other purposes, it will be used for other purposes. And there are people who will voluntarily want to hook themselves up to things like this, to have computers read their thoughts, to have chips implanted in their brains that essentially mean they don't have to think about anything because the computer chip can tell them exactly what they want to know at any given time without having to put fingers on a keyboard or open your mouth to talk to a text-to-speech situation, right? I mean, there are people who will want that, but just think about the implications of doing so. And the most dangerous thing about it all, and the reason I think that application should be banned altogether, regardless of whether or not you're willing to take the risk, is imagine if people have these things hooked up to their brains, particularly chips, and a nefarious actor in another country, let's for instance call them China, manages to hack into the systems to which these chips connect. Imagine what they could start doing to people's brains. Honestly, that is dangerous and silly, and we shouldn't allow it.
But you could make the same argument about all sorts of new technologies. And the reality is that it looks like these computer-brain interfaces, which is what they're called, will be commercialised within the next 10 to 20 years. And I personally would love to have one. I mean, think about it. We've gone from
You want the chip, the Chinese chip.
I think so. We've gone from, it's not the Chinese chip. I want Elon Musk's chip. We've gone from having computers, now we have wearables like Apple Watches, things like that. The next logical step is further integration of technology into our person, which would be a brain-reading computer, essentially. And yes, there are some security risks, but that's the case with anything. And the potential benefits for augmenting intelligence, productivity, it'd be great.
If I was to sort of instruct my kids as to what they should study if they were a bit younger than what they currently are, I would totally advise them to go into ethical law, that sort of area, in human rights, because as AI evolves, ethics is going to be the number one issue. And as always, ethics comes after these things are invented, after they're commercialised, and then people think, oh, hang on a second, what about the consequences? I would be okay with this if they would pause and say, all right, what are the implications? Let's put things in place now, because, you know, the right to your own thoughts could become the number one ethical issue of the next couple of decades.
Yeah, and the point you raised earlier about if you get charged with a crime, for example, could the police then subpoena the records of your brain activity to determine what you were thinking, to establish intent or where you were or what you were doing? I mean, the implications of this are massive and rather scary, but I do think it's also quite an exciting technology.
I mean, you know, it was more than 2 years ago now when Elon Musk and other big hitters, Steve Wozniak, co-founder of Microsoft, big hitters in the AI world, came out and said we need to have a moratorium on development of AI technology now and seriously think about the regulation of this before we go any further. And that hasn't happened. I mean, we're going head first into this stuff.
Well, do you remember Biden famously put Kamala Harris in charge
of
protecting human rights in the age of AI?
And her,
how seriously the US
and then she said, you know what AI is? It's 2 letters. AI. She actually said that. But, you know, if your phone gets hacked, your computer gets hacked, you can chuck it in the bin, get rid of it. If your brain gets hacked, well, things are somewhat more difficult.